Offspring's always a sterile mule. There are male mules and female mules, but they're all sterile mules. We won't get into all of that. It's all genetic. Most of our mules will come from Malcolm. Malcolm would buy the mules when they were young. He would train them and sell them to the Amish in Pennsylvania. They really worked them up there after 10 years. They were too old and too slow for the Amish. Malcolm claimed he'd buy the best ones back and sell them to us. We did get them with an unconditional guarantee. If they didn't work out, he'd take them back, as long as we took them back to Tennessee. We got about 60 animals now. We have more horses than mules because we use two mules. We have more mules than horses because we use 2 mules instead of 1 horse. The reason the mules generally aren't big enough to pull the carriage by themselves. There are rules and regulations. They do have to be a certain weight, a certain age, before they can pull the carriage by themselves. They work 5 days a week. They get 2 days off. We keep them in the city for 3 weeks and put them on the farm for a week. They do not work on the farm. I'm Ron. I've lived in Charleston all my life except for the 4 years in the Coast Guard. First 2 years over on the big island of Hawaii taking care of lighthouses. The next 2 years they put me on the West Wind and Icebreaker. So I spent 2 years between northern Greenland and the Great Lakes. Came back to Charleston, worked for the Navy repairing submarines for 25 years until they closed the shipyard down. Went back to school and now I'm driving horses and mules, so you never know where it's going to take. We're not really sure where we're going now. That's the big Air Force plane up there.
Hi, babe.
We have 50 of those stationed here in Charleston. They C-17.
You might want to keep this over here.
They had about 40 of those fly over in formation one day. Had a lot of noise. This area here used to be a creek. This is landfill. 40% of Charleston's on landfill. This is filled in back around 1800. The market was built in 1807 as a food market. Ladies on the front, where are y'all visiting from? Yeah, with us? I've been as far as Kenora. Been up there. Well, we went all the way up to Pickle Lake. I wanted to get to the end of the road. When we got there was a mining road that went another 400 miles. We went about 50 miles, and every 2 or 3 miles, little Indians would run up and look at us. So we decided to turn around and start snowing. We have 12 adults in Carriage 313, and I'm driving Margaret and Mary. Mary and Margaret. Linda, you put a 1 on there? 1, okay, thank you. Thank you. And where are y'all visiting?
Alabama.
Alabama, and y'all are from?
Maryland.
Maryland. Y'all?
Boston.
Boston.
Kentucky.
Kentucky. Connecticut, okay. Y'all Louisville fans? That team came to Charleston one year. The Louisville coach's daughter goes to the College of Charleston. And we went up there and almost beat them. They came down here. These baskets are sweetgrass baskets. Charleston's known as a holy city, not for the people, just all these churches we have. We got a bunch of churches in Charleston. Somebody said there's over 100 of them. That church is St. Philip. That church replaces the church that burnt in the fire of 1835. There was a boarding house back here for sailors. It burnt, the church burned all the way back to the barn. The church was rebuilt in 1838, and we had the Great Fire of 1838. that one started over on King Street. It went up King Street and up to the river, burned over 1,000 buildings. After that fire, the state of South Carolina would loan them money to rebuild, but only they built brick buildings back in Ansborough behind us. That's the oldest subdivision in the city, going back to 1740. Then there was a great fire of 1861. That was during the Civil War, but had nothing to do with the war. The fire started on the Cooper River, raised to the Ashley River. It was in December. The winds got up to now 50 miles an hour. They said the only reason the fire was put out, there was nothing left to burn. From one river to the next. In addition to the fires, Charleston was hit by Northern artillery for over 580 days. Everyone had to evacuate and move north to Calhoun Street, back where the big bridge is. And in 1886, there was a great earthquake. If it had been a Richter scale at the time, they believe it would have been a 7.3, they said. This is Mary and Margaret. Thank you.
So this one's Mary?
Mary and Margaret.
Margaret.
Margaret's over here.
Margaret's the leader?
No, Mary's the leader. That's why I beat my Margaret.
Poor Margaret.
That's okay, I'm just tapping on.
That should tell you to go faster or to go straighter?
Just to wake up. We're just to keep going. The earthquake 1886, they repaired the buildings, two of these brick buildings. They repaired the buildings by running rods to the buildings, attached the rods to the floor joists and ceiling joists. Then they put big timbers like 12 by 12 all around the building, gradually tighten those until like a large clamp to pull the buildings back together. Once the buildings are back together, they redid the brickwork to put those washers to hold them in place. Those call it earthquake washers and rods. So, these brick buildings are not brick now, they're solid brick. 14 inches thick. If you go down Philadelphia Alley, I don't know if you want to go down there now. You might see some ghosts down there. That's where the ghost tours go. And that used to be a club over there. That's where they used to let Hootie and the Blowfish play when they were trying to get established. So local boys made good. It was called Cumberland's. This is Cumberland Street. And the band was Hootie and the Blowfish. This is where the wall used to be.
Oh, this was the wall.
That's where the wall was.
Where is the wall?
I'll show you a piece of it. Most of it's gone now.
Right here?
There was an earthen wall in this area. Yeah, they pay a couple of $100 each to be able to do that in Charleston. So there's some convention. That's part of the convention. Anyway, so this is where the wall used to be. The wall ran down Cumberland Street, East Bay Street, Meeting Street, and Water Street. There was a wall, a moat, a drawbridge, close to 100 cannons surrounding the city. The reason, 1704, this is the southern colony. So they had to contend with the Spanish, the French, the Indians, and the pirates. The wall stayed up about 50 years, gradually coming down. We would go where the wall used to be. When the first European settlers came over, there were about 60 Indian tribes. The big tribe was the Cherokee, a lot of small Indian tribes. As you travel through South Carolina, the rivers that reach the islands, many of them named after the Indian tribes that had been in that area, like the Pee and the Santee and the Kiowa. The first European settlers were the Spanish. The settlement was 60 miles north of Charleston and Georgetown, San Miguel, and Guadalupe. In the 1520s, 600 settlers came over from Hispaniola. 6 months later, 150 survivors went back. They'd been there a few years before that, invited the Indians aboard and sold them into slavery, so they weren't too popular when they went back. The French tried to settle them south of Charleston at Beaufort. That was a failure in the 1550s. And the English came in 1670, only 148 settlers. And of those 148 settlers, there were 3 blacks, a man, his wife, and their son. Whether they were slaves, free, or indentured servants, we really don't know. And the slave trade started outside of Charleston, the Charleston Airport, we have a Boeing plant. They build 787s, the Dreamliners. So you might see them flying over Charleston. There's about 10 of them out there waiting to be delivered somewhere. Originally, there was only one Carolina. The Carolinas separated in 1713, and originally, it wasn't a royal colony. It didn't belong to the king. It was given to 8 large proprietors. Those 8 that helped King Charles II to gain his throne, they did a good job, but the ones that followed did not. So the king was petitioned, and by 1719, this became a royal colony. Religion was extremely important in the colony. The official church of the colony was the Church of England. They allowed others, referring to the others as heathens, Jews, and the sinners. Some of the heathens are still with us. Sephardic Jews coming from Spain and Portugal came in the 1690s. There's been a synagogue in Charleston since the 1740s. The sinners were Presbyterians, Congregationalists, Baptists, Lutherans, Quakers, Huguenots. About every major denomination of those times except for the Catholics. They didn't come until 1789 because there were too many Protestants. I said there were too many Baptists one time. Never do that again. The lady told me you never had too many Baptists, but I've had Baptists disagree with that. Queen Street used to be Dock Street because there was a dock on the end of the street, and State Street used to be Union Street. There's the waterfront park down there. Yeah, State Street used to be Union Street. Could you imagine that during the war? It actually changed after the Revolutionary War because it was commemorating the Union of Scotland and England. So check out the waterfront park down there. This was an auxiliary building for the fire department. It's now a parking garage for the luxury condo. The condo is right next to it, right condo. And across the street there, you see people in Charleston like 3-story buildings, even if they don't quite finish them off. And that building there was a tenement, shops downstairs, tenements upstairs. The entrance to the tenement was not through the shop, but through the archway. The man that owned that tenement was ambassador to Mexico, Secretary of War. We know him for the plant that he brought back from Mexico. That was owned by Joel Poinsett. He brought the poinsettia back. Dr. Garden lived around the corner, and named the Gardini after him. And Unity Alley is one of the places the President Washington entertained. He made a tour of the South in 1791, and he was entertained there at McCrady's Tavern, which is still open today. Just under new management a few times. So this is called the French Quarters. The French Huguenots, they settled in this area. The Huguenots, they left France, they spread throughout Europe. They went to South Africa, they went to New York, they came to Charleston. That type building there is unique to Charleston. Professor Stockton, the College of Charleston, he tells us that type building is a modification of a post-medieval English urban design. We call it a single house because it's only 1 room wide. The doorway off the street up there's a doorway to the porch. Some still call it a piazza. You step up onto the porch, the entrance to the single house is usually between the first and second room. That window lights up a stair hall that cuts the house in half. It had very few windows on the neighbor side. It was impolite looking at the piazza. The chimneys are inside the house on the side opposite of the porch, and the houses face to the south and to the west to take advantage of the prevailing breezes. As a rule, they go right on the border of the property, right up to the sidewalk, where there's a porch that usually indents with. Professor Stockton says that's an architectural relief. He says so you don't trip over the first step. That house used to be out here. 1820s they moved it back to there. 1970s they moved it again. Moved around a little bit. The vines are the creeping fig vines. What holds the shutters open are called the shuttered dogs. The street is made of cobblestones. Cobblestones are used as ballast on ships to give them that stability across the waters. When they came to Charleston, they would have different loads. They would discard the cobblestones. They made streets out of it. So the waterfront was over there where those buildings are. That's where the ship's tied up. The sailors and mariners would drift over this way, not going to St. Michael's, the church. They were headed for the pink building down the street. That was a tavern. That was a little bit more than the tavern. This is where the red light district was. That was one of the bordellos. I got into that with the third graders, realized I was in the wrong place. I said, well, this is where the sailors used to socialize at night. The teacher said they understood the purpose. And right down the street, you'll see at the moment there's a gate open. That's the old slave market museum. The slave trade had taken place on the waterfront. 1850s, they moved to these buildings. This is where the auctions were held in this area. So that would have been a slave auction, a Ryan slave auction. Right where those people are. The ironwork over there is wrought iron. Across the street here, each piece of iron is heated, bent, twisted, and welded together. No windows on the neighbor side besides the privacy, which service a fire break. There was fire through here in 1790. The live oak trees, they're evergreen. They lived to be 500 years old. 8.5 was a little carriage house. It was damaged by the earthquake. It's leaning, it belongs to the bank. They say it's the only bank building in town with a lien on it. They're called live oak, L-I-V-E.
Oh my
Live
God.
oak. If you stay in Charleston for a couple of months, you'll get used to the Charleston dialect. It's kind of hard to get used to. This skyscraper built in 1911. President Taft came to Charleston. He rode the elevator to the top. He was impressed with the view of the city. The people of Charleston thought it marred the view of the city. So they passed the height restriction of 8 stories. You will see some taller buildings when they were built outside the historic district. The first 2 floors were made commercial, the top 6 are condominium. The rest of across the street, those columns made cast iron. When they had the cast iron storefronts, then they could put the big plate glass windows. It was popular in the 1840s. St. Michael's is down the street again. And the animals, those animals there are leopards. They wanted to put them aside. The Board of Architecture Review said they've been there 50 years, they could stand another 50. That's St. Michael. That's St. Michael. 1752. That was one of the last buildings built with British funds, 1760, the old exchange building. Part of the original wall was under that building. There's also a dungeon beneath there. Pirates were kept there before they were hanged. Patriots were kept there. And President Washington was entertained on the 2nd floor. That's all brick and stucco. This is one of the few stone buildings they built during that period. And the live stations, the keystones, each one has a different expression on its face. I had a gentleman on the carriage. He told me the whole useful information he got out the whole tour is what the red dots are. That's where the liquor stores are. And they close at 7, close all day Sunday. You buy your beer and wine in the grocery stores, even on Sunday. Here in Charleston, we did that because you tourists didn't know where to go to buy it, so we legalized it for everybody. Now when President Washington came over, he was rode over by 12 captains, and they landed right where that real estate sign. All that was water over there. The lookout, well, you'll see it in a minute, that's where the harbor pilots were. You can't come into this port without harbor pilots guide you through the channel. Come on, girl. Now those are water oaks there. They're a little bit different. Crepe-myrtle trees, and they have red prints, have white flowers. Walker Evans and Caldwell over to the right, they printed the money for the South. It's now a condominium. Nice condominium. Those buildings across the street, those were built about 3 years ago. If you build something new in Charleston, you have to make it look old. These buildings here are old. Yeah. And that's not a bar. architecture review. They want to do something to that building. Before they can do it, they have to have a public meeting. Anything you do to the exterior of your property, you have to have approval.
They need approval.
Yeah, they need approval.
I was wondering, you said that the water line was up there. Is the rest filled then, or has the
It's
water
all filled.
receded?
It's all filled. Yeah, over the centuries they fill it in. So it's just over time. These were old shops, warehouses, counting house downstairs, tenements upstairs. By the 1920s and 30s, this had become a rundown, dilapidated part of town. Then people would buy these old buildings, renovate them, turn them into private residences. Then they painted them the different pastel colors, and this is what's known as Rainbow Road. The significance of the colors, there is no significance. It's just the colors they wanted to paint. It looks like that was orange at one time. You can change the colors, you just have to get approval. And there was a service station there. There was no problem with tearing the service station down. It was built in the 40s. The problem was what they let them build there. It took them about 10 years to decide what they would let them do there. So that was a lot of controversy over the years. Come on. Charlestonians are still the friendliest people in the United States. We used to be the most polite. We haven't got that award recently. We politely asked them to give it to somebody else. Now the lady that gave out the politeness award, she moved to Charleston. But she said we couldn't have it. She had to give it to somebody else. But they're still polite. Like this sign up here reads, beyond this point by invitation only. Isn't that a nice way to say, keep out? And see over there, there's a piece of the wall up. Those plaques tell all about the wall. There was a drainage problem. And they dug up the street, the College of Charleston, the Charleston Museum jumped in the hole and they studied the wall. See a piece of it up there. And see that row of bricks going out into the parking lot? That's where the wall used to be. They said if you looked at it, it was 22 feet high in low tide. And y'all missed out on those two houses. You could have had both of those a few years ago for $17.5 million. The harbor pilots are there now. Charleston is a major shipping center. They're in the process of preparing to deepen this harbor from 48 feet to 52 feet. It'll be the deepest harbor on the East Coast. The reason for that, the next generation of ships, when they leave Europe, Asia with 13,000 containers on it, they can come straight into Charleston at any tide. They can come in now at high tide. That means they can get under that bridge at high tide. That's kind of unusual. Most times the bridges are too short. That bridge was built to accommodate the next generation of ships. That bridge was built 10 years ago. It was built under cost and ahead of schedule. And it's lasted for 10 years, so we did a pretty good job, right? It's going to cost $600 million to do it. The state will pay half, the federal government will pay the other half. There's a bridge in New York that they're going to raise to let the boats go under, and that's going to cost $2 million. So it's cheaper here. Even though these streets are landlocked, they're still called wharfs. And that one up there, you can pronounce it Vandehorst or Vandross. Either way is recognized. Vandehorst Road was built in 1800 as an apartment house, 3 apartments. So that was built in 1800, that was built in 1900, and the one on the corner was built in the 1990s. When you see these street signs, you're welcome to walk up and down these streets. The only complaints I hear, they say some have a tendency to walk in the yard is deep in their windows. For some reason they don't like that. And the ironwork over the doors and windows was done by Philip Simmons. Philip Simmons passed away a few years ago at 97 years old, a black gentleman. He started as a blacksmith when he was 12, retired when he was 84. This work is throughout the city, the state, the Smithsonian Institute, His workers over in Europe and over in Asia says internationally known before he passed away. I'll look down the street at the different roofing, the tile, the tin, and the slate. Whatever type roofing you have to maintain that same type. Except there, they let them put copper on. The camellias will bloom during the winter. We always have something blooming in Charleston. These crepe myrtle trees, they bloom during the summer. When they have red trunks, they have white flowers. So those are built in the 1950s, those are built in the 1780s. Balconies, lanterns, doorways, glasswork, even Spider-Man would be proud of that. No, he didn't. Most of these were done prior to. I'll show you some more. The stars are earthquake washers around. That's the largest single house in the city, 9,000 square feet. With a large piazza. See how the chimneys are inside the house? Those neat chimney caps up there. And the huge palmetto trees in there. Stowe's Alley. Some of Philip Simmons' early work is down there, and y'all feel free to walk. Don't walk through the gate there. Do it down Stowe's Alley. If anybody read Pat Conroy's book South of Broad, that's where he got mugged. That's another story. The porch slants for proper drainage. That's how they had to cut the door to make them fit. Most men can identify what the project ended up looking like. That was built in the 1750s. The plaque on the wall over there shows what the wall looks like. The wall ends here. That wall was built in 1830 to keep the water out. When they built that, then they started filling this land down in front of it. In 1718, Blackbeard set off the coast. He captured citizens, including children. He made demands of money and medicine. I said he would kill the captives, burn their ships, come into the harbor, burn all the ships in the harbor, and box the people about the ears. Reluctantly, they gave in to Blackbeard. Blackbeard got away, but one of those pirates came back into the waters, and that was Stede Bonnet, the gentleman pirate. Educated West Indian, had been a British officer. Why he turned to piracy? Some say he was deranged. Others said it was a nagging wife. Whatever reason, coming back into these waters, he was chased and captured off the Cape Fear, North Carolina. Brought back to Charleston, tried, convicted, and hanged along with 29 of his pirates. During that same month, they hanged another 19. 49 pirates in a 1 month period. After that, they went away. Many say they went back to North Carolina, but we don't get into that anymore. And this was a creek, Vanderhorst Creek. This is where the city ended. Back there is where they hanged the pirates and buried them in this area. These were built in the 1850s. The porticos were added in the 1890s. And the military used that one. A Navy lieutenant had a room there, office in there. He was dating a young lady from Denmark. In fact, she was Miss Denmark. And unfortunately, she was accused of being a Nazi sympathizer. The young man was shipped out of Charleston and ended up in the Pacific on the PT boat in 109. So that's where Lieutenant John F. Kennedy had his office in Charleston. And there's a lighthouse on Solomon's Island. You can drive over there. That's where Fort Moultrie is. Edgar Allan Poe was stationed there. He wrote the short story Gold Bug. Osceola, the Seminole Indian chief, was buried there. And Edgar Allan Poe wrote the short story Gold Bug. There was an original little fort out there, Fort Sullivan, a fort made of palmetto logs and sand. And while everyone was in Philadelphia preparing to sign the Declaration of Independence, the British attacked that fort. The British was unable to knock the fort out, but the fort inflicted over 200 casualties on Sir Peter Parker's fleet. And that was June 28, 1776. So here in South Carolina, we celebrate Carolina Day on June 28th, and then the 4th of July with the rest of it. And way out in the middle of the harbor is Fort Sumter. The first shots of the Civil War were fired from the tip of James Island on the Fort Sumter. There were battles in the harbor. There were battles over on James Island, battles over on Morris Island. Morris Island is where the Massachusetts 54th was defeated. Historically, that's where the movie Glory took place. Once the Northerners occupied that island, then they bombarded the city for 580 days. Out past Fort Sumter, 1864, the Confederate submarine, the Hunley, that sank the Northern warship, the Housatonic, and it sank. They found the Hunley about 15 years ago. When they brought it up, they were 8 crewmen on board. They had the treatment for those 8 men, and that brought 10,000 reenactors to Charleston from the north and the south, and submarine sailors from throughout the world converged on Charleston that weekend. Come on, pretty girl. That's one house. Well, it's 3 condos now, but it's built as one house. That was 3 apartments at one house. It was all built as one house. The building that had been there was so damaged by the Northern artillery, it was torn down. That was built in the 1880s. That would be the East Lake style. This one. Yeah, sold for $2.7 million 10 years ago.
But it's 3 apartments, you said?
There was 3 apart, 1 on each level. But now I think it's back into private residence, or whatever they want to do. This was built 1820s, modified in 1830s to give it a Greek revival look. This is open to the museum, part of it. They even have a bed and breakfast here. They told me to come in and pick up some people, so I waited here and the people were waiting around the corner for me. I didn't know there was a bed and breakfast there. There's a lot of bed and breakfasts in Charleston. You just have to get on the internet. So this seawall was built when Hurricane Hugo came through. There was about, let's say 8 feet of water in this area. That was bad. The real devastation was out there. Isle of Palm, Sullivan, and McClellanville. There was a 20-foot surge out there. We don't get that many hurricanes here in Charleston. We get one about every 25 years. More like Hurricane Hugo, but once every 100 years. Then we see Florida, Texas, Louisiana, even New Jersey. They're completely unpredictable. That building was built in the 1920s, the one next to it 1900. The rest of them were built in 1840.
The man who gave the order to fire.
The house up there had huge columns that were toppled by the earthquake and never replaced. Some said the columns on that house down there oversized. They're not. They weren't built to be seen here from the street. They were built to be seen coming in from the water. If you see them from out there, they look just right. Sherman